and welcome to this edition of Exclusive Interview, coming to you from the studios of 84 TV Radio, Abuja, Nigeria. My name is Stanley Bentu. Now, the Nigerian Constitution, 1999, gave roles and responsibilities to three arms of government: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. But it also mentioned one other sector: the media, and entrusted the media with a duty to speak truth to power. But have our laws and regulations empowered the media to do exactly that? Or are there certain things that cripple the media in its quest to perform this duty? That's what I would like to find out today, but first, this report.
The mass media is central to the development of any democratic society. This has been generally acknowledged in developed societies to the extent that the media has often been described as the fourth estate of the realm. Nigeria, like other democracies, recognizes the role of the mass media and has gone to the extent of giving constitutional backing to it. The 1999 Constitution did not only guarantee every Nigerian freedom of expression and to own, establish, and operate any medium for the dissemination of information, ideas, and opinions, but also gave obligations to the media to monitor governance and hold the government accountable to the people. But how well can the mass media in Nigeria monitor governance? A critical look at the Constitution reveals that whereas the media is given the responsibility to monitor governance, it is not empowered to perform this role. Today, Exclusive Interview speaks to Mazi Paul Ibe, a media specialist who explores the issues surrounding the mass media's ability to perform its constitutional role.
Welcome back to Exclusive Interview, and right now it's a pleasure for me to be joined in the studio by media practitioner and analyst Mazi Paul Ibe. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, there's been so much talk about media and its role in governance. Some people call it the fourth estate of the realm. But let me just quickly quote this from the 1999 Constitution. Section 22 of the Constitution says that the press, radio, television, and other agencies of mass media shall at all times be free to uphold fundamental objectives contained in this chapter, that's chapter 2 of the Constitution, and uphold the responsibility and accountability of the government to the people. This is what our law says, but has our society empowered the media to do that?
Well, unfortunately, there is a disconnect between, the intention and what we have in reality. The media is expected to be the eyes and the ears, of citizens. But to be able to do this, they need to be empowered. They need to be prepared for that. Are they prepared for that at this point in time? I seriously doubt it. And so what we have seen is that governments at all levels continue to have their way with no accountability. And, the people are less informed about the activities of government because of the inadequacies, of the media itself to be able to, properly, play, the role that has been set out, for it. So there are challenges, partly political, partly economic, factors, that have militated against, the vibrant, media like we used to have in the past.
These inadequacies that you mentioned, what are some of those that you've identified as most problematic?
I think it's essentially the fact that the media has, the economic downturn it has impacted on, different, aspects of society. But I think it's been more pronounced, in the media. The cost, in newspaper, for example, the traditional media, the cost of newspaper and all of that, you particularly need foreign exchange to be able to procure all of the things that are needed, ink and all of that. The revenue, advertising, is at its lowest. if you take a look at the pages of the newspapers, it has shrunk. People doing 64 pages, now they are doing 34 and they are doing 24 pages.
Well, the internet is partially responsible
for
that.
The internet is also another. That's another frontier. It is also, it's supposed to be a competition, really. And of course, the traditional media need to be awake. They need to, they need to key into the new, media, because the stories don't break the next day. They break instantly. And so the advent of GSM, technology, handheld phones, have ensured that citizens, journalists have, begun to play, a much more, vibrant, role. And a lot of the stories that, we've seen broken in recent times have been done by citizen, journalism. So that is part of it. But the reality is that with, no funding, no revenue, training, it's also another aspect of it. The journalists are not, well prepared. They're not well trained, unlike what's used to obtain, in the past. And again, government is also conscripting, the space. Government is becoming more dictatorial instead of enabling the institutions that have been set up to be able to regulate, the media, the practice of the media and media practitioners. So those are some of the factors that have militated against the media, recent times.
And let's take a look at some of these factors. You mentioned media ownership, and I find that particularly interesting, because when you look at television and radio, which are the two media that are still doing well, because the print industry has been very hard hit by social media and the internet as a whole. But the government has kept, according to law, a very tight grip on deciding who gets to own media. Before you get a license, you have to go to the presidency, and a lot of these people who eventually end up getting licenses are cronies or allies of whatever government is in power. So it becomes very difficult for media professionals to own media organizations. If you look at the list, a lot of our media organizations are simply not owned by professionals, unlike engineering firms by engineers, or hospitals by doctors, or law firms by lawyers. And do you think that that has had an effect on the quality of journalism?
Of course it has. I mean, they're actually owned by politicians.
Precisely.
Not even business people, not entrepreneurs. So if an entrepreneur sets up a broadcast station, a newspaper, for example, you will know that, where he or she is coming from. He wants to make profit, deliver dividends to, shareholders and all of that, and be able to, do the job of informing, educating, and entertaining. But, we have politicians owning, those media organizations. And so what do? They set agenda based on their own political, leanings. And then, on one hand, you see government, public stations, especially the broadcast system. They shut out, other people apart from the government. So the public broadcast stations have become bulletin. The news has become more a bulletin of government of the day. Whichever government. It's something that has happened over time. So those are some of the challenges that are faced.
So how do you think we can get around this problem? How can this be fixed?
How do we get around it? I am not saying that government, even in the US, you have a public broadcast station, PBS.
Certainly there's a place for them.
Yes.
But how do we get more professionals to be able to own media organizations?
It's about funding. It's if you don't have access to, to funds to be able to set up, ideas rule, fine. But with all of your ideas, if you don't have, the funds to actualize, your vision, it comes to naught.
So because you need 20 million naira to get a terrestrial license for a radio station.
It's amazing.
And that's if you are even permitted.
From that, from the cost of the license, you see that people are shut out. People who actually, stakeholders in the industry, those who have the wherewithal to be able to run stations, whatever it is, professionally, are shut out on account, the exorbitant, cost, of the license.
And are doomed to remain employees.
Exactly.
As opposed to
that's it.
Entrepreneurs. Okay, well, what about the question of welfare? Because any journalist that is not even certain of his salary or certain of benefits or does not even have life insurance, can that kind of journalist hold the government to account?
It cannot. Because, what has happened is that, and it's a reality that we've lived in. We've seen media organizations, the ID card they give to, journalists, to reporters, is their meal. That's what brings the meal. They are not well paid. They are not paid regularly. I mean, all of them, practically all of the, newspapers, apart from, a few, they owe salaries, and, these are, non-public, it's known even to government and to all of the organizations that are supposed to hold, these publishers or media owners accountable. Even issues like tax and pension that are statutory. And you have a government has set up institute organizations that are supposed to ensure that these things are done. They are not done. So you see journalists, after they had exited, had finished their, they are retiring. They don't even have pension. That is supposed to be a savings for the rainy day. They don't have that. And we've seen situations where some have been able to take, those media owners, to court. So they are not well trained. They are not well, remunerated. How can they keep a watch? It is like giving a yam to a goat to keep, for you. It will eat the yam.
Basically.
So that is what we have. And the journalists are unable. They are unable to fulfill that crucial, assignment of reporting. Unbiased.
Well, lots of things to unpack there. But we'll have to take a break. Don't go away, because when we come back, we'll be talking about freedom of information. How easy is it for journalists to get the kind of information that they need to from public organizations? We'll be right back. There's a wind of change blowing over Nigeria, and it's coming from the Tertiary Education Trust Fund. If you want to find out how TED Fund is bringing the Nigerian government, industry, and the academia together to drive a new knowledge economy, tune in to this station every Wednesday at 8 p.m. for TED Fund, the paradigm shift. It's informative, it's innovative, and it's exciting. TED Fund, the paradigm shift. Proudly produced by 84 TV Radio. Welcome back to Exclusive Interview. I'm still here with Mazi Paul Ibe, who's a media analyst, and we're talking about the media's responsibility to hold the government accountable, to speak truth to power, which is not an easy thing when you consider the enormous powers that any government would have, much less the Nigerian government, that does not always stick to the rules. So, Freedom of Information Act, it's a very interesting situation I found myself in. I want to share that story with you. During the early days of President Muhammadu Buhari, there were calls for him to make public his declaration of assets, and in his first media chat, he referred the journalists who had asked to go to the bureau to be able to get that information, and he said there's a law that allows them to do that. I was invited to a roundtable on anti-corruption, which was hosted by the United States Embassy, and at that function, the director of the organization was asked a direct question concerning the president. He said, well, unless we have the permission of the party in question, we cannot release this information. So we have a law on the one hand. The president said, oh, well, you can go there and get my records. But over there, they say, oh, well, we need his permission. So journalists are being bounced around by this. So how can the Freedom of Information Act get more bite?
For a journalist, the most important ingredient, for the job that he does is information. It's the way information is to journalists is the way food is to a human being to survive. Because if you don't have information, what are you going to be reporting on? So I think despite the law that is in place, that's supposed to give access, find out a lot of journalists face obstacles, trying to get ordinarily basic information that should be available on websites. Some of the websites are not even functional, despite the fact that billions of naira have been spent trying to set them up. So on a click, a journalist is supposed to access information. And then if there are other ones that are not readily available, you apply, as the law says, and within a certain time frame, you'll be given. But we've seen SERAP, for example, one of the organizations that have been in the forefront of trying to hold government accountable, as taking government to court severally and all of that, back and forth. And of course, even the situation with the court, judicial system, how snail like this thing.
It's very slow and also very expensive.
That's
so
right.
A journalist can't keep going to court every single time he needs a document.
Very frustrating. So ultimately, what does it do? The journalist, because the journalist knows the limitations that he faces, and of course he also tries to cut corners, because he also has to deliver on on an assignment. And so all of the ingredients, all of the things that are supposed to, be in a story, who did what, when, where, why, how, will not be there. So you see a story that does not have all of the ingredients that it's supposed to have because of the limitations of access, to information.
Mazi, it's interesting that you say that, because I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the fact that a lot of our public officials who leave office do not like to speak. If you watch CNN or Fox or any other international news stations, you would see a lot of people who have held office who would come to tell the public whenever there's a situation, okay, this is what is really going on. This is what tends to happen. These are the rules. These are the regulations. But over here, it's very difficult to get some of these past officers. Even if you approach them, they would tell you, oh, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to say anything. I just don't want to go public. And so you're left as a media practitioner with third-party analysts. And I think that miseducates the public, because people generally just come on media and voice their opinions, which very often are uninformed.
The society, is supposed to benefit from the expertise of people who have passed through a system. They know the system, whether as civil servants or bureaucrats or technocrats or whatever it is. And so that benefit is what should form some of the the things that will help us to critically look at issues. But they wouldn't, and the reason is simple: they have skeletons in their cupboard, so they wouldn't want to come out to speak to a system that they know clearly how it is like, how it had operated. And because as soon as they do that, the government of the day will open their files, for them. So more of a blackmail. And so they rather, decide to be quiet, don't rock the boat, and, just move on. And, and of course, ultimately, we lose the benefit of, the expertise they have developed, over time. And like you said, we'll have recourse to people who never experienced it, because you can only speak to what you have experienced, what you have, first-hand, information of.
And what about another challenge is, any kind of protection or insurance. For instance, we had the corps member who was covering the riots that took place, the Sheikh El Zakzaki. I think he was a youth corps member with Channels Television, and he unfortunately
that was in Kaduna.
Took a bullet. And I've heard a lot of journalists say, well, we want to do more investigative journalism, but if anything happens to us while we're out there, who will take care of our families? We do not have life insurance or any sort of financial coverage. Even our salaries are not guaranteed. So it's just safer for us to quote public statements.
I agree with you. Yesterday we started, watching the second impeachment trial of the United States. Some of the United States former presidents. Some of the visuals that are being used, to advance the case of the house managers came from journalists who, despite what was happening, it was chaotic, it was dangerous, but the tapes were rolling, the cameras were rolling, and they are using, them. And because those journalists there know that whatever happens, their families, will be taken care of, and so they have a commitment. Why that, what is it? Why am I doing what I'm doing? If there is nothing in it for you, there's a tendency for you to be complacent. And so the journalists will not go out of their way to put themselves in, harm's way. Those ones in the state capitals rather prefer to be in government houses and then depend on press releases, and they cannot go, out into, different local governments to be able to feel the pulse of what is going on, possibly because of fear of kidnap, fear of, bandits and all of that. So, and with no insurance, like you said, they've been talking about this insurance and all of that. And it's here to, to take families. I'm aware that the NUJ, the new, NUJ leadership is trying to, to do something, in that regard. And the earlier it is, it is done, the better, for the journalists, so that they can be protected, from anything, any eventuality. Otherwise, they will never give their best.
Another area that you had mentioned earlier is the social media, and how that has become a game changer. Now we have journalists who are breaking stories even as individuals, but it also has its downsides. And recently, the Minister of Information has been at the forefront of trying to get some kind of regulation in there. What are your views on this? The social media, is it a potential tool, or is it more of a hazard?
The social media, it's a blessing if it is well handled, because, like I said earlier, it gives citizens the opportunity to, report things that are happening within their immediate environment. We saw what happened with the crisis in Lagos during the NSAS protests. It was an individual who was streaming live that gave people in their homes an insight into what was, happening. That is the power of the social media. Of course, the downturn is the advent of fake news, because the social media also, there are people who sit, before their laptops or on their phones, and they can, come up with all manner of this. They can edit things out of context, and of course, that's where you have a regulation. Has the organizations, have they been able to regulate traditional media? They have not been able to do that. All of the laws are there. And so they are not even prepared for the new media, because the new media also comes with a new, challenge. How can you regulate, for example, something you do not even understand? So those are some of the, the challenges. The security agencies, do they even know what we are talking about? Do they know what new media is? Do they have the capacity? Do they have the tools, to be able to track, some of, these things, and be able to, prosecute, people, who are in breach of the law diligently. And, that is the only way. You must not think that it's just about, the whole gamut of the social media. We need to isolate those who have made it a hobby of, trying to malign people, or use it for, to cause crisis and the rest of it. But otherwise,
and to do that,
it's a very strong tool, for development. If well, managed, you can use the social media to achieve major, development, goals.
They would have to even track the people down first before they can even implement. Okay, very quickly, because we're rapidly approaching the end of this program. What advice do you have for the media and for the government if we are to improve on this core constitutional requirement?
I don't think it is smart, even from a business point of view, to have the proliferation of media, organizations that we have all over the place. There are 36 states, 774 local governments. hundreds of thousands of communities. And so when you're setting up a media organization, you look at, do I have the resource to be able to effectively cover, this particular area? And if you don't, I think it is high time we get into situations where people will pull, resource, together, and not just, go out and be a lone, ranger, because there's only a limit to what you can, achieve. And depending on third parties, materials from other distance also negates the whole, essence of it, because you want to be able to present news, present features, present whatever it is from your own perspective, and not from the perspective of others. So I think ownership, we need to look at the structure, the ownership, of the media. It's very important. And so, and then even more importantly, the fees paid for licenses. There's a time we have to have a review, because the question the government needs to have at the back of the mind is, what is for the government? What is the objective of having the media? It's for mass, mobilization, to be able to, aggregate all of the distance so that you can, energize, the people. And so government should have at the back of the mind that government stands to benefit, like every other person, the owners, the stakeholders, the journalists, the media, and the rest of them. So, and government should also needs to moderate some of the things that it's doing. And it's only when government receives the short end of the stick that government begins to wield, the big stick to be able to, clamp down on this thing. When, for example, if a journalist has done something that is in breach of the law, you isolate the journalist, and instead of coming to
shut down the entire organization.
Instead using a sledgehammer to
kill a fly. Okay. Thank you very much, Mazi Paul Ibe. It's been a pleasure having you on the program today.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you so much.
We will be right back. Don't go away.
AD4 TV Radio, with focus on education with emphasis on research and innovation, science and technology, women and girl child education, children, health, youth and sports, socio-political and economic reforms, security, environment, entrepreneurship, and entertainment. Will give you information at your fingertips. Learn on the go. Follow AD4 TV Radio on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. AD4 TV Radio, reliable and credible.
We love you, AD4 TV Radio.
Welcome back. Critical points made there by Mazi Ibe. But what struck out most for me was the question of media ownership. Now, it is so prohibitive if you are a professional to be able to own media in Nigeria. First and foremost, you have the 20 million naira ownership fee if you want a commercial station. Where are you going to get that? Well, for me, it seems that most professionals are almost doomed to remain employees. And maybe that is one of the challenges that we're facing with quality of journalism within the industry. So, perhaps the government needs to look at these laws, make them more friendly, perhaps lower some of these costs so that entrepreneurs who are also professionals can dream of owning media houses and serve the country much better than they have in the past. Well, that's it for this edition of Exclusive Interview. Until we come your way again next time, thank you for stopping by.